Om Te Dhyan Yoga Nugata Apasyan Devatma Shaktim Svagunayar Nagudam Yaha Karanani Nikilani Tani Kalatma Yuktanya Adidishtat Yekaha. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Practicing the yoga of meditation, the ancient seers of India beheld the divine energy, the Devatma Shaktim, existing everywhere and in everything, who, though veiled by her own modes of nature, was nevertheless one and indivisible, and who had been incomprehensible earlier due to the limitations of their own intellects. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimohi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we always and ever meditate on the radiant effulgence of the Supreme Being, abiding in our hearts and minds eternally. May that one blessed presence guide and protect us, and protect the three worlds. May Brahman protect us, may Brahman sustain us, may Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the teachings, or with the world. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Welcome. We are just opening our class. We are inviting people who are coming into our new shrine room and classroom. We are live streaming right now, but please enter in and take your seats wherever you like. We have just barely finished with the opening chants, which tell us to meditate on the radiant effulgence of the Supreme Being, which abides in our hearts and minds eternally. And that beautiful chant out of the Svetashvatara Upanishad, which says that in the earliest of times, the Indian seers practiced the yoga of meditation called Dhyan Yoga, which is, by the way, the name of this class. This is the third class in a series of 3 on the 7th limb of yoga. 7th limb of yoga is Dhyan Yoga, or the yoga of meditation, as we just chanted. So the seers first had their vision of Divine Mother of the Universe, the Devatma Shaktim, she's called, by meditating deeply within themselves. And of course, as I've been presenting it here in the last 2 Sundays, and which I'll go on presenting this Sunday, I feel that in this day and time, particularly in the Western culture, that to practice meditation, we're going to need to qualify ourselves in a little deeper and maybe slightly different way than we have been doing. Many of us have been either just jumping into meditation without any instruction, which actually is not all that rare, because my teacher didn't give me much instruction, but he did give me a mantra. And a mantra is a kind of meditation which prepares you and qualifies you for meeting the deity, whichever deity it is that you love the most. You can see right here, if the live streaming audience were to look, you can see in this particular portion of the room we have images of Madame Pele on the wall. And she's, of course, the Hawaiian goddess of fire, lava. And so she's sort of our own Mother Kali here in Hawaii. Mother Kali's younger sister, sometimes we call her. And there are other deities off behind the shoji screens, which gives our new shrine room a kind of oriental touch. And they're going to be worshipped after class today with a small, short puja. We'll do a full inauguration of this new room in October for Durga Puja, or Navaratri. So this is our new space, and to meditate on the Devatma Shakti, to honor her and to propitiate her. So as the background consciousness and the substratum that's in everything and behind everything, as the Upanishad chant said that I just chanted. So they meditate upon her. Before they hadn't seen her because of the limitation of their own intellects. So it shows that there's a kind of yoga that you practice that Krishna called Buddhi yoga in the old times. We're now calling it Jnana yoga, and you're sitting in the atmosphere of it right now and have been for the many years, actually several decades, that SRV has been teaching Jnana yoga, along with the other four yogas. The yoga of action, the yoga of meditation is what we're concentrating on here, and the yoga of devotion. All those are requisites actually for one another, and so that the more popular integrated path for the more akamai, and sorry for using a Hawaiian word along with all the Sanskrit, but akamai means someone who is in the know in Hawaiian. So for those who are in the know about yoga, they know that it's not enough in this particular age especially just to practice one yoga, like say the yoga of action. Because you might say that most of the world's practicing the yoga of action right now. If they called it a yoga of action, it would be good, because then they'd have more conscious awareness attached to their works, and they would be more aware of the karmic implications that both good, bad, and also mixed activities bring about over time. But practicing one yoga might not be enough to realize this Devatma Shakti, this divine energy that's within everything. Because as I was thinking earlier today when I was looking at the time, I better not be late for class, I said. So I looked over at the time and I couldn't see the time. And why was that? Because I was standing in such a position that the light was reflecting off the lens of the clock, and I couldn't see the time. So I had to move to the side and move closer and find where the light wasn't refracting off the lens, and I could actually see what time it was. And I thought, what a drag. What a problem. Everything here is veiled. So you have to take such trouble to unveil it, you see. That's the problem. And yoga, of course, is the solution. So if people were taking more trouble, means not just one yoga, but actually practicing a yoga of love of God, and bring some tears of sweetness. So Krishna used to say, if the needle is rusty, it won't get attracted to the magnet. So if you consider your mind a needle, and the rust has been this lack of love of God, or attachment, too much attachment to works and objects, too little consciousness around your own awareness and the presence of the Devatma Shakti, as we're talking about here, then the needle of your mind will not be attracted to the magnet of Brahman, or Almighty Father, or Buddha nature, how you would call that. Our universal shrine room here, if you could see it, you might have caught a glimpse of it last week when the camera was panned, has images of Jesus Christ and Lord Buddha, Sri Krishna, and our mandapams to Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and Swami Vivekananda, and other deities like Ganesha to make it all auspicious. So all of this requires some special concentration, and that will remove this rust from the needle. So he used to say, what do you use to remove rust from a needle? Salt solution. You get some salt solution and you rub the needle with that. So he's saying symbolically that's the tears that you shed, salty tears. Love for God. He used to say people cry jugs of tears for family and spouse and relationships and money and objects, but they don't cry one tear for God. So he said if you could just cry out one sincere tear would roll from your eyes for love of God, then you would find that God would come to you in your deepest meditations. So that bhakti yoga is also very important yoga to entertain and to practice. So yoga of works, add a little love of God into that. And then add some study of scriptures, some wisdom, as I was just saying. This is the Dharma, or Gyan Yoga, or what Sri Krishna was calling Buddhi Yoga at the end of the Bhagavad Gita. Also, you could say what Holy Mother used to teach, a yoga called Mano Yoga, which is the yoga of the mind. She's really much talking about getting the mind on your side against all these other obstacles that are there in the world. Like I was saying, I couldn't even see the face of the clock and couldn't see the time, so I had to adjust myself. So everything you'll find is like that, and even if you get attracted to the beauty of nature, you'll find ultimately that that's a veil to seeing the formless Brahman, because that's God with form, if you want to be gracious and kind to it. But nature itself, of course, is insentient. But when we're talking about God or Brahman or Buddha nature, Almighty Father, Tathagata Garbha, Pragyaparam, all the beautiful words for divine reality in the different religions of the world, we're talking about something that is pure sentiency, not insentient. And its pure sentiency is there because of the lack of coverings, false superimpositions, called vivarta in Sanskrit. So you'll find if you're an aspirant after the truth, living in the Kali Yuga, in a physical body, on a material planet called Earth, in this day and age, that you're going to have to go strip coverings off in order to find that truth. Everywhere you look, you'll be stripping coverings off of things. So that's what Christ meant when he said, if thine eye be single, you shall know the truth, because you're going to have to unveil something of a great power inside of yourself in order to see through duality, in order to see beyond the delusions of collective mind in a world like this, or even beyond the realm of the ancestors, as Lord Buddha was wont to do. And in his long meditation, he had a very long meditation himself, as you might remember, under the bo tree. So those three yogas are very important, and you add to it then this yoga of meditation, Dhyan Yoga. You're talking about the seventh limb of Patanjali's yoga. Patanjali is the name of Raja Yoga, Patanjala, Ashtanga. There are different names for this great yoga, which the father of yoga called that because it was named after him. Patanjala, this sage Patanjali came up with this beautiful system, and he was sandwiched right in between Lord Buddha, who was about 550 years before Jesus, and Gaudapada, who was about 550 years after Jesus. And sandwiched right in between them was this great soul named Patanjali in one of his incarnations. And he, at that time, systematized yoga into 8 limbs. And that's what you see here on this chart, which we looked at last week, a very simple rendering of it. And we actually took the time to go through it all, so I won't take a lot of time to go through it, but just to point out to you where you stand in it. As you see that if you're talking about seventh limb, it's right there, meditation. Preceding that, you would have need to have gained concentration. That's unbroken concentration, so that you can put your mind on one thing without faltering for a phase of time. Can you do that? That would be my first question to potential yogis and yoginis of the day. Can you put your mind upon one thing without deviating or wavering for a period of time and hold your attention on that thing? Of course, people are able to do that more or less with their work. And they asked Holy Mother once, can you think of Brahman when you're all the time? And Holy Mother said, well, no, of course not, because there's this work to do. So she had to serve the devotees, and she was doing all these activities, and she was, as it were, telling us it's impossible to keep your mind on the ultimate Brahman, which is actionless, and do action at the same time. Only very great souls might be able to entertain that possibility, but for the most part, you have to concentrate on work, and you have to keep it there. And then you have to shift your mind over to Brahman and leave work away and concentrate just on Brahman. Now, if you can do that shift, that 2% shift of consciousness, like me moving from one part of the room to another so I could see what time it is, then you're able to concentrate on one thing at a time, and that's going to be best for your spiritual life. Then I would say you're a candidate for mastering Dharana Yoga. Dharana Yoga means concentration. It's the 6th limb of yoga. This class is very good for people to watch who are attached to, say, Hatha Yoga, and they think that that's all that yoga entails. We beg to differ, and we want to bring forth the fact that you don't have to be preoccupied with the body alone. You may use that as a prerequisite practice, but you then, once you get your asana settled and you can sit like this for any period of time, then you need to get your mind settled on one thing for any given period of time. So that's what we're talking about. The whole thing is a step-up process, a graduation. And you don't want to go back later and find that you didn't master one level of yoga, and now that it's pulling you out of your meditation or out of your concentration. Or if you back up one more step to pratyahara, that is control of the senses and the thoughts of the mind, then you don't want to be called out of that either by some errant thoughts that come floating through, or some rebellious thoughts or old habits and things. So you want to be able to master these in succession from the ground up. So last week we started off showing you and went through each of them pretty much completely, the yamas and niyamas of yoga. They are listed as these 5-10 roots here. Things like non-violence and truthfulness and non-covetousness of others' goods, and practice of moderation of sensual appetites, being able to detach from commerce with gifts and giving of gifts and receiving of gifts, and practicing tapas, that is austerity, doing your study of scriptures and memorizing them, increasing your devotion to God, Ishvara Pranidhana, and settling the mind into a state of contentment, santosha, and then saucha, purifying the mind. If you can master these 10 roots of yoga, then you're fit to sit, if you want to put it that way. And then you won't be fidgeting so much. You'll know where to put your arms. You'll know how to cross your legs and stay seated. You'll know how to keep your back straight. You'll know how to breathe, or you'll be able to breathe better. And then you can center your consciousness in the heart and throat and third eye. These upper lotuses or chakras will open to you, and an inner life will be granted to you. And this inner life is what most people don't have. Like the fishermen along the river when Jesus came. He saw they had an outer life, but they didn't have an inner life, so he said, "Come, I will teach you that." He was talking about yoga. When you come into the realm of name and form, you automatically depart the presence of the formless Brahman. The two can't exist simultaneously, side by side, in the consciousness of the mind, particularly the dual mind. If you have a one-pointed mind, then basically you can begin to put two things together into one. And that's at a later stage of yoga, in meditation, and finally in Samadhi, where you'll be able to do that. But in the meantime, you're going to have to hold your attention on, and it's being called out by such things as violence, coveting other goods, goods of other beings or other countries, and giving of gifts and receiving of lands and properties and so forth, and all of these other early practices that we studied last week. So when you get to a place where you can sit and begin to breathe, and that's the third and fourth limb of yoga. That's called asana and pranayama. And finally you reach this, sometimes I call pivotal point, or it could also be called a falling off point, depending on if you're successful at it or not, if you can control your senses. Controlling your senses is not just giving up objects and being able to take your attention off outer objects, as we found out by studying the Asampragyata chart, and that's what we left off with last week. You must also be able to withdraw your inner senses from the inner objects. Now, if you don't know that you have inner senses, then that's going to be a problem, because you're trying to withdraw your outer senses from inner objects. Not going to work. So you have to give room for this fact that you see internally, and you hear internally, and you taste internally, and so forth. And so you have a set of 5 subtle senses, and those are attracted to objects in dream, for instance, or in fantasy, or in sankalpa, a projection of the mind. So those need to be also controlled and brought back from their respective objects. So you have actually, just like you had 10 yamas and 10 niyamas, that is 5 of each, you'll now also have 10 senses and 10 elements that you have to put in their place and withdraw your attention from each of those respectfully. And if you can do that, then they figure you've mastered the fifth limb of yoga, that is pratyahara. And that's why I call it a falling off place. It's very difficult for people because they find themselves called back to objects or desires in the waking state. And then when they sleep at night, they also find themselves attracted to things in their sleeping state that they can't let go of. The recurring dreams of that nature, say even such things as nightmares, tend to become habitual and have become problematic for people. So all of these things, we know that as in non-duality, that is in Gaudapada's teaching, as being, as we studied in our recent retreat on the Columbia River Gorge a while back, we know that as being mastering the A and the U of the word, Om. And M would be, of course, the deep sleep state. We'll look at maybe a little bit at that in Shankara's way of view coming up in this class. But if you are able to do this, pretty much what the first 20 aspects of yoga there, that is 5 yamas, 5 niyamas, your inner senses and your elements, physical elements and so forth, if you've managed to connect those and withdraw your attention, your attachment from them, then you arrive at this fifth limb with abilities to be successful and to master it. Then it's an open door to you towards concentration. So you see what's being said here is that people are trying to concentrate and trying to meditate, and they're falling out all the time. And Father of Yoga says it's because these first 10 or 20 tattvas or principles have not been connected. Maybe even before they are connected, they haven't even been accounted for. Some cultures don't even account for them. So if you can account for them, then connect them, you've mastered them. And if you've mastered them, you could withdraw from them on demand, anytime you like. You can take your mind off of them. It's going to be very hard for a bee to take its mind off of honey, and for a fly to take its mind off of unclean things. So the mind has to give up its flyhood. It has to enter beehood, and then it has to enter seerhood. It has to become a seer of everything that it oversees. See? So in this way, yoga is a step-by-step process inward, and it arrives at that fifth limb called yoga, and fifth limb called concentration. And then finally, you get to this, it's called pratyahara. And then finally, you get to this yogic limb called concentration, dharana. And if that remains unbroken, then you can get into meditation proper. So back to my point of 5 minutes ago, a lot of us are having problems staying in meditation unbroken, and because of having these inability to have mastered all of these earlier requisites. So we want to be sure to put those all in their place, and like tucking in the corner of the blankets in a bed, just tucking it all in perfectly, and then put ourselves into meditation. Otherwise, the results are going to be scattered or mixed in meditation, as we're seeing in a lot of meditations that people are reporting nowadays to their teachers. Now, of course, if you were to reach the seventh limb, which we've been talking about for the last 2 weeks, you would have this candidacy, you could say, for Samadhi, which is the 8th limb. You can see that here in the chart too. And you see how Father of Yoga splits up Samadhi into first 2 parts, seated and unseated. That's called a sampragata and sampragata. Sampragata means the meditation still has seeds in it. It means you're still aware of form, name and form basically. That name and form is either outward or it's inward, but you're still aware of it. You're passing through different levels of awareness. That is, your consciousness sometimes is being made aware, sometimes against your own will, of these objects that are crowding in on it. And they could be outer at first, and when you master the outer, then the inner become more powerful and influence you. This is also the case, the bardo of death. When you leave the outer objects, everyone's going to be removed from the outer worlds, from this world. See, so that's not a problem for some people. For other people, it's a great problem, because they have attachment and desire still, so they find the outer world being taken away from them, and they have fear, and they have no place to lay their head there either. But for some who have gotten rid of the desire for outer objects, they just move amongst the sense objects without any particular attachment to them. And they find it easier to let go of the world at the time of passing from the body. And then the problem would possibly be heaven, you see, or what we're calling the realm of the ancestors, what we call Bhuvarloka or Svarloka in our tradition. And then you have these beautiful subtle objects and the presence of subtle bodies that you encounter. And so you'll have to move amongst them without undue attachment as well, which you probably could practice in your dreams. You see, if you go into dream with some consciousness and you're aware of your dreams, and you wake up later and you meditate upon your dreams, that's called swapna samadhi. There's even, you have a kind of samadhi in your dreams where you're aware that the dream of passing through different phases and with different souls in it, then you have a facility in your inner consciousness to have already withdrawn yourself from shapes and forms and names and experiences in the dream state. You realize them to be as ephemeral as the waking state. And this is what Gaudapada tells us in his Karika on non-duality in Advaita Vedanta, that waking and dreaming are both equally unreal. They mirror each other. And so you're going to want to strip those coverings away too. You're going to want to penetrate deeper into a formless state, and we call that deep sleep or sushupti. Sushupti is the absence of all objects. And that happens to a soul who has prepared themselves for transcending subtle objects. Then it can be quite shocking as well, because all of a sudden you're left in a void, or emptiness, darkness, or sometimes even a surface light, without anywhere to go. And so one needs to meditate also on emptiness. And that's a very important meditation in Buddhism. In fact, I think I probably want to take you there first as we finish up this you might call it introduction or preamble on these 8 limbs of yoga. Now there you see, as we mentioned emptiness, you can see how the Buddhists look at it. There are 4 stages of absorption that happen. Now, I wish I could just turn that back again, so I should have had them on 2 different stands, but for the live streaming audience, they can only see one at a time anyway. But if you can remember that tree of yoga, Patanjali also had it broken up into 4 seated samadhis. And those 4 seated samadhis have 4 concomitants with them. Buddhism's sort of similar like that. You can see here that they're called the 4 dhyans, or 4 stages of absorption. We take the word absorption in English, and then we also take the word merging. You see. So if you've already merged in something, say the ice cube is already melted in the water, but then you could also say the iceberg, once you put it in, the ice cube, you put it into hot water, it begins to absorb in stages, or call it a sugar cube if you want. It begins to break into 2 chunks and then 4 chunks, finally into granules, and finally dissolves completely. So metaphorically, you could say that the mind will absorb itself like a sugar cube into its formless Brahman in stages. It's sort of what Patanjali is talking about when he talks about savitarka, nirvitarka, savichara, nirvichara, sananda, and sasmita. Those are the terms for seated samadhis, which you saw we began to look at last week, and we'll segue to that chart after we look at the Buddhist way of looking at this. There you can see the 4 dhyans. Now, if you're practicing meditation, 7th limb proper, remember, they figure you've probably gotten over your attachment to name and form, and you're beginning to look for the experience of formlessness. You want to have nirvana, or you want to have samadhi, or if you're Zen practitioner, you want to have satori. You're looking for this unique experience of oneness, if you want to call it that, or lack of two-ness, lack of manyness. And it's going to be happening to you in stages of absorption over a period of time. Probably can say that Lord Buddha and Jesus in the wilderness and so forth, when they were sitting under their respective trees or on the mountaintops and they were having meditation, they probably got into formlessness by stages. First, the mind was concentrated more on collective humanity, and they were sometimes aware of practitioners or devotees or people of the world suffering, and other times they were aware of the formless Brahman or Almighty Father or Tathagata. So in that way, you could see that their consciousness was shifting back, but the shifting was happening at a very subtle level. So if you are practicing the 7th limb of yoga seriously, and you're courting the 8th limb of yoga called Samadhi, then you're probably going to want to familiarize yourself with the way Patanjali and Lord Buddha experienced it. Lord Buddha experienced it like this. First, it's the relinquishment of desires and unwholesome elements, attained through vitarka and through vichara. Now this is just like yoga. I mentioned those savitarka and savichara in yoga. You could see them listed here on the tree of yoga if you look at it again. Basically it means you want to distance yourself from the mind's ability to, or you say its penchant to, conceptualize things. The whole world is a projection out of the mind, they say, and your own individual mind is projecting the world every time it wakes up and withdrawing it every time it goes to sleep, along with 7 billion other people doing that. That's a very powerful force called sankalpa. And so people are waking and sleeping and waking and sleeping all the time, and the worlds spring into their consciousness and then disappear from their consciousness like waves rising out of an ocean and disappearing into an ocean. And this is a constant image in front of their mind's eye, which causes a kind of hypnotism or a kind of sleep that gets them into some sort of false belief that the worlds in name and form are real. But Jesus said you cannot build your house upon sand, shifting sand. You have to build it on bedrock. So if you're beginning to take this world of shifting sands to be real, then that's a real problem for you. And you're going to need to strip off coverings and see through and penetrate through with your mind's eye, as it were. So as you do so, these 4 stages of dhyan are going to settle in with you. First, you're going to want to back off from this vitarka, conceptualization, and that'll turn into vichara. Pretty soon, the outer world will have less impact on you, and the inner world will have a little bit more, will come marching forward more concretely. And he calls that discursive thought. You hear that expression used in English in Buddhist circles, discursive thought. So that will give way to this next level of absorption, part B of number 1, that is, which is called priti and sukha. Your enthusiasm and your interest will be perked when you see the difference between the outer and the inner. And you begin to focus more on the inner, then you're beginning to see not just the possibility, but the actuality of there being inner worlds. Now, this is pretty much hidden from most people. You talk about stripping coverings off things. Most people are just seeing the veils, they're happy with the veils, they entertain the veils, they play with the veils, and they don't go any deeper. So if you get good at stripping off veils or penetrating through, appearances would be a good word, then you're at this 1B kind of level of discursive thought. You're beginning to get inspired by what you're meditating upon. Your interest is perked, is what I'm saying. And so now all of a sudden you're sitting more attentive, you see. You're not falling asleep, for instance, or you're not disbelieving, you're not having any more doubt. But you can see people in that kind of state. They get very inspired by meditation. They can hardly wait to sit down and practice it. That's a good thing, see. Because most people want to, they have to just go do their meditation because their teacher told them to, and they hardly wait for it to get over, see. But when you get to a place where meditation actually draws you, and you can hardly wait to get into it each day, maybe you can hardly wait to get home from work so you can sit in it, or you hardly wait for that vacation so you can go to Hawaii. No, you can go to Hawaii and be with us and sit with us in meditation. Then you've got some sort of aspect called priti. It's very pretty, as they say. And along with it comes sukha, a kind of happiness. Now this is not happiness with external objects, it's a contentment. So if we flipped back the chart again, you'd see that one of these yamas and niyamas was called santosha. It means contentment. So it's a kind of happiness of contentment, I would say, that you're not driven anymore to go looking for things beyond your own scope. You're beginning to see that the kingdoms of heaven lie within you, if you want to put it that way. And now you can go to them, whereas before you couldn't. You only had the outer world that was available to you, and everyone in the world agreed with you. Yes, the outer world's all you have. Better make the best of it. But you have this inner nadi, or this inner nerve, this inner channel in which your consciousness can flow inwards towards the inner worlds, and the inner worlds begin to become more real to you than the outer world. That's why you get perked and interested, and that's why they sat for days. It wasn't an austerity for them after a while. Sure, Lord Buddha encountered Mara, and Jesus encountered the devil. These are devilish things inside of you that are there because of the presence of negativity in the human mind. But imagine sitting long enough to penetrate through that and all of a sudden not wanting to leave your seat. That's how they describe it. In fact, the Zen Buddhists ask you if you've died on your zafu, you see. Have you died on your zafu yet? It means when you just finally give up and penetrate through that level of consciousness, you're happy sitting here for as long as you want, and you can do so by entertaining what's inside of you. A whole expanse of inner worlds opens up to you. So that's the way it should be described and tried to be comprehended by the meditator who is still making forays into inner consciousness like that. Now, this is the first state of absorption, is what I can say about it in a short amount of time. And that leads to the second state of absorption. So you could say the sugar cube is now broken in half in the hot cup of tea, and now it's beginning to want to break into other parts. And so 2 is the end of conceptualization. And basically about that it says discursive thought begins to disappear. Also, it's penultimate to an inner calm. You hear about that saying, the peace that passes all understanding, that they used in Christianity. So it's that kind of inner calm that begins to take over. And the mind can focus itself by meditating on any object it wants without getting stuck on it or attached to it. So it can see the whole inner terrain, and it can get what the yogis call samyama. By concentrating and meditating on anything, they can begin to extract the essence of it. So this is a very important state of absorption. Of course, it's not fully merged yet. It's still breaking down consciousness, all of its forms. So now it's beginning to head towards this third level of formlessness called disappearance of joy and the arrival of equanimity. So the happiness and the peaceful calm and the joy that attended it earlier was now beginning to disappear, and you just feel absolutely equanimous all the time. It's sort of like sthiti samadhi in Vedanta, where it's just Krishna mentions that in the Bhagavad Gita. It's just a state of everything is perfect all the time. I'm in a state of absolute equanimity around anything, and that includes anything that happens in the world outwardly. Nothing can bother me anymore or take me out of that state of absolute equanimity. That's a third state of formlessness all on its own, that equanimity. It's a sthiti samadhi or equilibrium, yoga. They say yoga is that kind of equilibrium. So you really are reaching to the penultimate stage of yoga when you attain that. And finally, what they call continual wakefulness and subtle abidance. Of course, Sanskrit, of course, Pali, which is a form of Sanskrit that they were using in Lord Buddha's time, and now English. We've come down 3 steps to try and find words to describe something that's beyond joy and its disappearance, and it's beyond even equanimity. And all that we can say in English about it is that you've attained wakefulness, eternal wakefulness, what our founder Alex Sixon used to call the insomnia of yoga. So you find that you don't need sleep anymore, and you don't need food anymore, and you don't need discursive thought, and you don't need joy, and you don't even need to be in an equal state all the time. You've transcended that, and you're abiding. Probably one of the best words, and Vedanta likes it too, is abidance in the self. We are Atman, all abiding. So they've chose that word to describe the indescribable state of being, with a capital B. This is all, of course, as contrasted to becoming, because you can see in a sense there's a little element of becoming in all of this, isn't there? But when you reach this 4th level of absorption, you've reached a state of all abiding consciousness. It's like a lake without any ripples, just perfectly homogeneous, pure, and without any movement. And you are that entirety of that. You're not just a part of it. You're not separated from any way. And your peace and joy and equanimity is now unalloyed and uninterrupted, whereas before it was you're coming out of it into states of absorption. So we're to understand by mature meditation that if you get into the 8th limb of yoga called Samadhi, that you'll be experiencing these kinds of absorptions, but don't mistake that to mean that you'll be just going to one and then disappear forever. Usually most beings are not able to hold the 3rd and 4th levels of formlessness and have to drift back to the earlier ones, back to discursive thought, back to something more friendly and familiar. Sri Ramakrishna used to say about that, the bird flies high in the sky, but it has to come to rest on a branch every once in a while. So that soul that is still wanting to return to a more familiar station of consciousness, and there's no problem with that, wants to come back and rest on objects, and will of course have to man the senses and the ego to do that. So when you're talking about this kind of lack of form, you're also talking about the transparency of the ego as it gives itself up more and more, dying on the zafu, as we just mentioned. Now, as far as Buddhism is concerned, at least in several schools, we have nivarana there, 5 hindrances to these 4 meditations. Desire will be one, ill will towards others will be a second, then sloth and torpor will be a third, and restlessness and compunction will be a 4th. Doubt will be a 5th. You can see how doubt dies late, hard and late. doubt goes away at a very late state in the game. What does it remind you of, I could ask, these 5? Because what did Patanjali say about yoga? There are 4 great impediments to it. And one of them was sleep and samadhi. Sleep, right? And another one is attachment to name and form, pleasure and pain, and so forth. So you can see how probably Father of Yoga was very much influenced by Lord Buddha's teachings in this way, around this very rare and sort of esoteric practice. I say when most people think of yoga, they think of asana, or maybe some breathing exercises, but they don't think of the 10 yamas, niyamas that preceded it, nor do they think of mastering the senses, concentrating, meditating, and getting into a non-dual state. Those are all part of yoga. In fact, I think they were the more essential parts of yoga. I could not master my posture and not breathe much, and I could probably still master these other limbs if I had a mind to. So most people are concentrating on those particular limbs that are least important to the seers. However, they might be most important to the early practitioner, because they haven't mastered their seating posture. So how are they going to meditate if they can't stop moving? You see? So they have to calm down the body and calm down the limbs. This movement of limbs is called is another set of 4 problems that happens to the yogi that is sort of similar to that too. Is angame jayatva is what it's called in Sanskrit. It's trying to think of a way to put it in English, but it's always having to move your limbs. You don't know where to put them. You see. So some people even put up a thing, rest their elbow. Okay, now it's okay. But then this starts hurting, you see. So you have to, as Swami Vivekananda put it, just put the left hand on top of the right hand and put them right there, and that's your meditation posture, and don't move from there. Just rest it in your lap and forget it. Angame jayatva. The anga, of course, is limbs, means limbs. And then shvasa prashvashaha is another problem, is that I can't control my breath, you see. My breath is erratic. And so you have to teach the breath how to breathe. Teach the lungs how to breathe. It should be their business to know how to breathe, but they forgot somewhere along the way. So you teach them how to balance the in-breath, puraka, with the held breath, kumbhaka, and with the out-breath, rechaka. And don't get preoccupied with this. Just learn it and go past it. You don't have to become a bellows, professional bellows or something. You don't have to become an old twisted tree either, shifting itself in the wind. Just master those postures after mastering the yamas, niyamas, and go on and experience what yoga is truly about. Yoga in essence is oneness with Brahman. Yoga in practice is the 8 limbs. So those are 2 aspects of yoga that are very important. If you can't be one with your own true nature yet, then practice. And if you've mastered the practice, then no mind, no matter. Your mind will be in a perfect state in the world and the body, and the various vagaries and vicissitudes will not be a problem to you. You'll be in this state of equanimity, you see, and you can remain there. So you'll come out of some states of absorption into others, but here. But if you have these problems, you come out and you have ill will towards somebody, like some race or some being or some person or some ex-wife or husband or some errant child or whatever, then of course you're going to be pulled out of yoga. You can't say that I fell out of yoga, you see. You want to keep yourself in yoga every day and every breath of your entire life, especially once you attain it. So these are problems there. You can see this other further teaching in this chart that I've gathered from Buddhism is these 4 states of formlessness. You would think that once I reach formlessness, that's it. You see, okay, the sugar cube is completely dissolved in tea, now I can just drink it and enjoy it, you see. But they're even calling this divided into several states that seers in that state have been able to recognize, put their finger on, and actually describe it. That's Akasha. You've reached the stage of limitless space. So you're to think that as I got into formlessness, that I still was holding some idea that space has divisions in it. See? And so I haven't understood the nature of consciousness yet. I'm still measuring consciousness by physical space or by dream space. See, because dream space is also divided. So I've carried waking and dreaming into this state of formlessness with me, and that's disallowing me from getting into samadhi, because I'm still having some level of the idea of space when there's no boundaries there. You've got a few little boundaries there in your thinking process, which will call you back to the body, for instance. I need to go back to physical space, or I need to go back to prana where I can breathe again because I've stopped breathing, and so forth. I need to go back to life and be reborn. All sorts of things connect with this subtle tendril of attachment to space. So Akasha just means space in Sanskrit, and for the person who's preparing themselves for a practice of yoga, they should encounter Akasha and meditate on it, like quantum physics, for instance. They could just give up physical space for just a second, and they'd find the kingdom of heaven within. They'd find that there's a space, a doorway to a space within. This is what we were talking about here at the top of the chart, and when we started into this teaching. Akasha has a subtle aspect to it that's actually more important than this aspect, because that came first and this followed it. From subtle space came physical space. We don't understand that in this day and age. And of course it's all coming from the space of consciousness, and that's been delimited by the space of mind. Because now I have my own mental space, and I have my own dream space. So to take up time and space, name and form, and causation, karma, those 5 things, that's the description of Maya. So if you want to know what Maya is, you've got the 5 names for them there. Nama, Rupa, Desha, Kala, Nimitta in Sanskrit. And that's been a definition that Swami Vivekananda brought back to us in recent times, into this country in 1893. So we should start thinking about name, form, time, space. Space being what we're talking about right now, plus karma that comes from living in name, form, time, and space, as being the very nature of covering power. We would call that avarana shakti. And when it covers, then it gets distorted. We call that vikshepa shakti. So these are teachings that are very key to our tradition and to the philosophy. There's a covering power and there's a distorting power. But thankfully, there's always a triputi. See, dualities are a problem, but there's always a third way, and that's called a triputi. And so what kind of power is that? Prakasha Shakti. Who does that belong to? Divine Mother of the Universe. She's called Prakasha Shakti. She's the revealer. She's the revealer to people who are stuck in covering power and in distorting power. The mind is stuck in covering power, that it itself covered everything. And then it distorts what it covered it with, you see. There's green scum on a lake, that's covering power. The wind comes along, blows it, and it scrunches up into little mounds and stuff. That's distorting power. So it's a double problem. But if you push the scum aside, there's the revelatory power. You see, you're looking at your own face reflected in that clear water. So covering power and distorting power happens on the surface of consciousness only. So one song in India says, dive deep, O mind. Go below the surface where death is granted its fishing ground, you see. So you need to dive deep into, past the surface. That would be tearing a veil away, or getting rid of a certain covering power that's there in you. So that's what comes to mind when you think of space and the first level of formlessness. The stage of limitless consciousness is next. So of course, if you take away those final subtle barriers of space, you'll find that there's no limit to consciousness. That maybe you were placing little fences here and there. Like I was walking out in the back of my land my neighbor's land, actually my landlord's land, I should say, the other day, and there were fences everywhere. I had to come, and they had barbed wire. You cut yourself on them and stuff, you see. So there's consciousness in the form of land, and they've got it all separated off into pastures and so forth, keeping living beings in from wandering here and there. That's okay, I'm everywhere already, I said. I don't really care about that, because I'm the whole expanse of that, you see. So in this case, they call this in Buddhism vijnana. It's a little bit different way than we use the word in Vedanta. We use the word vijnana to mean that highest intelligence that you get after you've had samadhi. You have samadhi and you come back to the body and mind and senses again, and what you know is called vijnana. It's the highest intelligence. Here they're using it in the Buddhist way a little bit differently, but you can see it's still a very elevated axiom. So you come into knowledge that there's a space of limitless consciousness. Our founder Lex Hixon was very much enamored of that. And the Buddhists also like that idea of limitless consciousness. Third is arupa. Arupa means a state of nothing whatsoever. So this is getting subtler and subtler and subtler until you can't really find another word for it, maybe except causal. And so you're getting onto the original cause of things, or maybe even beyond cause and effect, even beyond the original cause, say like the Word. In the beginning was the Word, is the original cause of everything. So when you get beyond the Word, you'll find out there's this limitless space, and then there's a limitless consciousness that is its underpinning. And then finally, there's just nothing whatsoever that you can put your finger on. You can't put your thumb on it. And so you get this idea of, like Sri Ramakrishna said, this bird flying into the highest reaches without any limits to its height or distance that it can go, or in either direction. And finally, if could be anything that you could describe in words finer than that, would be sat asat. And you'll find this teaching both in Buddhism and Vedanta too, Advaita Vedanta. It's neither existence nor is it non-existence, because you'll find the problem with dualities is that they can persist to a very high level too. Like, say, you might be wondering about birth and life, birth and death, and then you have this idea of eternal life. So there's, again, a triputi to everything. So if you keep pondering about the level of existence and non-existence, is existence or is it non-existence? Does God exist or does God not exist? And that forms a subtle problem in the mind. So finally they just gave away that problem at this level. They said, we're not going to entertain it as being existing or not existing anymore. And so they gave up the final vestige of any kind of delineation or limitation to it, even beyond the fact that it was nothing whatsoever. Because if I happen to call it nothing whatsoever, then I have a problem between nothing and something. You see. So they're always practicing this kind of Advaitic one-upmanship, is what I'm saying. And of course, for most people, it's going to be difficult to describe if you're trying to describe it. It's also going to be difficult to comprehend if you're trying to listen to it. Of course, the solution for that will be to begin to practice in order to experience it. Now that you've heard it, you can experience it. That's a kind of a law in spiritual life, is that you can't really experience samadhi until you've heard about it. So it needs to have a word, and it needs to have a practice, and then you need to sit yourself down and entertain that practice and realize it. You'll be probably amazed at what you can realize once you've filled in all the blanks in your consciousness that have appeared there because of this covering power. So you become a professional uncoverer. You just, there's a covering, I think I'll pull that away. Now I'm going to move, there's another covering, I think I'll pull that away. So you just move through life, everything is a covering, and you're continually practicing the art of uncovering things. And that's living with your third eye open, basically. It's not very easy to do in a world like this, And you have to practice it in a careful way. But nonetheless, it must be practiced. And if you're seeking non-dual truth. So that's a mouthful, or let's call it a mindful, you see here, in the way that Buddhism would speak about it. Now, if we go back to the chart that we were looking at when we ended last week's class, we'll see that we can pick it up right there where we left it off. This was looking at Patanjali's system again, and we had made it through all the 24 cosmic principles. That is, we had entertained the 16 products of nature, and we wanted to meditate upon them. Basically, 5 senses, 5 active senses, 5 gross elements, and the fourfold mind. That is all one composite package that's been in existence since Lord Copula's time in India. 24 Cosmic Principles is famous. I mean, if you go anywhere with anyone who knows anything about Indian philosophy dating back to the earliest time, you'll hear about 24 Cosmic Principles. And everyone who followed used that, including Lord Buddha. Buddhism used it, Shaivism used it, Vedanta used it, Shankara used it in Advaita. The 24 Cosmic Principles were paid forward age to age as being the best system in which to understand the not-self. Eventually it came to be known as the not-self. In the beginning it was, here's the composites, the components of your universe. You have 5 elements, you have 5 senses that connect with them, you have 5 subtle senses in dream tonight, and you have a fourfold, and then you have 5 active senses, and you also have a fourfold mind. That's 24. So the whole thing's called the quintuplication process. And if you put it together like that, it's not hard to memorize, not hard to know about. You know you see, taste, touch, hear, and smell. You know that you move, you procreate, you excavate, you waste, and you know, all those 5 active senses are going on. You also know that you have these 5 subtle senses in dream if you're more aware. And you put those all together with a fourfold mind, which means an ego, a sense of separate self, an intellect that holds your wisdom, a mind that's dual by nature, pro, con, good, bad, pleasure, pain, and thoughts, your chitta. Chit happens, they say, you see, when you have a mind like that. So 24 cosmic principles you've got, that's your composite self. The non-self is what that ended up being talked about. And if you put it on the level of non-self and just try and forget about it, it's going to be a problem, because most people haven't accounted for them yet. Or if they have accounted for them, let's see, I'm going to study aquatics, you see. So I'm going to become an oceanographer. So water's my whole life, you see. So you become a professional water person, you see. And so then you don't account for air and ether and land and fire. So most people will take one of the 24 cosmic elements, maybe even one sense, and they'll concentrate on that. See? Well, my teacher used to say, if consciousness associates with water, it'll become a fish. And if it associates with 2 senses, hearing and smelling, it'll become a dog, you see. And if it associates with stupidity and slothfulness, it'll become a brutish human, you see. And if it concentrates, if consciousness comes down and concentrates on wisdom, knowledge, it'll become an intellectual, you see. So wherever consciousness puts itself and what it identifies itself with, that it gets limited to. And if you trace the 24 cosmic principles all the way back to the ego, you'll know who's doing it. See, if you don't include the ego into it, then all of these things are random, you see. Oh, air's over there, fire's over there, I'm seeing there, I'm smelling there, I'm touching there. And you never pull it all together into one composite package like Copula did, and which later enabled Patanjali to inform you how to meditate on them all. And therefore, you don't connect them. And if you don't connect them, you can't say, oh, guess what? All of that I've just connected is not me. This is how Indian thinking works, you see. It's called not this, not this. Because we're so involved with every little thing. Not just every little 24 thing, but every 124,000 things in each one of those 24 things. I'm talking about details, I'm talking about phenomena, I'm talking about incidentals, I'm talking about things that don't matter, that people vex and brood on all the time. So the whole thing can get exacerbated to such an extent that you're concentrating on the tiniest little portion of what consciousness is. And with the tiniest little bit of potential that you have. So that becomes problematic. So you take stock of the quintessential things. Pun, I'm using a pun. Quintessential, you see. That is quintuplication. You concentrate on those sets of fives. Didn't we just have it back here when we looked at the 5 yamas, the 5 niyamas, and so forth? So you concentrate on those, and you at least get that much together. You put it all together, and when you finally get it connected, you look at it and you say, there's a witness to that. I just did my homework, and I can see that someone outside of the scope of those 24 things is doing the homework. There's a witness to it all. Now this became a big realization at a certain part of spiritual history, let's call it, where people would start saying, the witness, you see, my third eye, there's someone looking on. See, my teacher used to put it, you can deny the existence of everything, but you can never deny the existence of the one who's doing the denying. See? So you put it all together in 24 package in order to account for it, and then you gave it up as being the not-self. Why? Because the one who put it together and then denied association with it, which is what you're doing, aren't you, when you go into formlessness? When you go into deep sleep tonight, you're giving up form willingly. Now, those who do it consciously, willingly, are doing it and getting samadhi. Those who do it willingly just to get a little rest and come back to the body, they're not getting samadhi. They're not even getting into proper meditation yet. So there's a certain ability among those beings who have collected all of this together, understood it, stepped back from it, and given it up, and then found the nature of the witness behind it all. The Sakshi Bhutam, if you want to use probably the best Sanskrit for it. Sakshi means witness, Bhuta means phenomena or things, Bhutas. So when you saw that, you withdrew from it, then you attained that kind of ability that will get you into samadhi. Now, we looked at all of that through all of these levels. The 16 visheshas, the 6 avisheshas, remember they were audibility, visibility, tangibility, flavor, and odor. Those are the subtle elements inside of you. Out of audibility came the power to hear, and out of the power to hear came the ears. You see? So you formed ears inside because you had command over the power of audibility. If you don't hear very well, that is, if you don't really think very well, I'm not talking about physical hearing as far as better hearing than others, I'm talking about the power to really hear something, then you didn't have mastery over audibility in your subtle body before you took birth. And it's the same with your eyes. If you don't see very well, that if you don't see the truth, then you didn't have the power of visibility conscious in you before you took birth. So these are things that are all to be mastered in this lifetime, let's put it that way. This is yoga as practice. Yoga as essence, people are talking about it glibly, you see. Yak, yak, yak. That is spiritual circles, but nobody's actually mastering it and using it in meditation very deeply. So in this case, you want to master the 5 tanmatras. These are called tanmatras. And Vivekananda came here, he said, oh, I see you're missing several things here. You're missing prana and you're missing tanmatras. You don't know about those in the West. So you can't get into a conscious dream. You can't realize your deep sleep state because you can't move inward because you don't have any stations inward to move to. You're trying to jump from the lowest step to the highest step. You're trying to jump from body to samadhi. It's not going to work. That's why people aren't getting samadhi in the West. They're not mastering the stations that move yourself, that move consciousness into samadhi. This is the whole point I've been making for the last 3 weeks in this series of classes. So it's very important to use avastas. Sri Ramakrishna was a master in teaching by avastas. Avastas means stages. Sri Ram says, enlightenment dawns on the mind by stages. You know Sri Ram, because he sings it in some of his songs, we sing about that. Sri Ramachandra Kripalu Bhajamana Harana Bhavabhaya Dharanam. Sri Ramachandra Kripalu Bhajamana Harana Bhavabhaya Dharanam. Nava Kancha Lochana Kancha Mukakara Kancha Parakanjaranam. Shri Ram, Shri Ram, Shri Ram, Shri Ramachandra Kripalu Bhajamana Harana Bhavavaya Dharanam. So Sri Ram said that. Consciousness, that is, realization dawns on the mind by stages. So if the great seers are saying this, and the great seers are also themselves going through stages, their stages happen to be very elevated ones. See, they don't have to worry about tanmatras anymore. Back here at this level of meditating, you see, because they've already mastered that, so now they can get into some stages that are very fine stages of their own consciousness. They're like Eskimo examining snow conditions, see, at a very high level, and so that they know what each little thing means. But back at the level of yogic practitioner, they're having, in the West, we're having to account for the fact that if we want to move inside, we have to know that tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, and smelling came out of these things. That is, came out of audibility, visibility, tangibility, flavor, and odor. So if you say, my eye is seeing, but what causes the mind to see? It has to be connected. What causes the eyes to see is what I mean. It has to be connected to the mind, and there has to be an energy between the mind and the eye that's causing it to see. Physically, I mean. Because you cut the optic nerve, the eye is still open and it can't see a thing. So along that nerve is running something called prana. So if you're not accounting for the prana, then you're seeing blindly. You're moving through life with eyes wide open, but you're completely blind. That's how the song in India puts it. Oh mind, you move through the world with your eyes wide open, but you're completely blind. So the seeingness of seeing, the hearingness of hearing, and the rasa in taste, the flavor, all those things need to be plugged into the composite body, you see, the component body. Because then you can move inside. And all of a sudden, you have a vision in dream tonight, you'll know that vision, where it's coming from and what it means to you, because the power of visibility is turned on in you. See, the switch got turned on. Whereas last year you had the same dream and there was no recognition or connection to it. See? But now everything is beginning to have meaning. So Patanjali is going back, you might say, for practitioners of this age, he was about maybe 160 AD when he put the system together, like right in the middle between Shankara and Gaudapada and Buddha. It was not long after Christ. So he was putting together this system for practitioners who knew about the 24 cosmic principles, who maybe didn't understand that Kapila really intended you to meditate on them, not just to take account of them and make a list. Okay, see. But I think I'm going to meditate on them and then maybe I'll connect them each. That word in Sanskrit is vyahriti. I have to make connections between the outer and the inner. Then my consciousness can flow along these connections. The yogis call this opening up nadis, or subtle nerves. You use them when you get into dream tonight. Your consciousness uses this subtle nerve system to move inward. And if you're moving inward with awareness, you're aware of where you're going and how you're coming back. Does this sound a little bit like a soul coming back to the body after reincarnation? Doesn't it sound a bit like that to you? Some souls can actually move into bardos and come back out of bardos after their death. And they can choose their parents, and they can choose their nation they're born into and the country, and they choose their work, come back for reasons. That's because they have this wide open channels that they're moving in and out all the time. It's like keeping a pathway open between the countryside and through a forest, you see. Always keep it open with a machete so you can move through it. Otherwise it overgrowth, you see. And then you try and move inward and you're stymied. You really can't see who you are inside. You can only see the outside. The veiling power is completely thickened there. And you have to pray to Mother, oh, reveal to me, give me a weapon. So she sends Patanjali and says, here, have 8 weapons. You see. Here, have 24 weapons, for that matter. And let's put them all together. So a little bit of a repeat of last week, but on a little bit different level too. We went then to Linga Matra. That means Linga is the last form you'll see, pretty much. If you go inside the meditation, remember we're moving towards formlessness right here in Buddhism. And since Patanjali was so well aware of Lord Buddha's teachings and so reverent of him, then we know that you're beginning to move into a level of Linga Matra. That means you're getting to the universal mind, what Kapila called the Mahat, the great mind, God's mind, if you will. And so that's what you're beginning to come into recognition of in this, as you move through this meditation on the what Patanjali called the alambanas, that is principles, what Kapila was calling tattvas, principles. Then several thousand years later, Patanjali was calling them alambanas, principles to meditate upon and to connect. We're probably to think that that's what Kapila actually meant, but so much time goes by, the long efflux of time, to quote Krishna in the Gita, that these channels and pathways get overgrown with the growth of delusion, you see. And so Patanjali has to come back and then say, well, here, now let's use these as paths for meditation so that we can open these channels back up, move inside, see ourselves, and be free. Pass our time contentedly and be free, as Shankara said. Because Patanjali's next incarnation was as the teacher's teacher of Shankara. See? So this is all connected in that way too. Well, we looked at Linga Matra and we read that list. We see that the ego dissolves into the great mind. The great mind would be the first evolutive nature, Prakriti. And that reveals the nature of the soul, Purusha. The Mahat then disregards all evolution, reflects only on the great soul, and then makes its introduction to Alinga. Almost identical to these 4 levels of absorption. You could almost put those 4 straight across to these aspects of Sasmita Samadhi and show how the mind, the ego, is giving itself up by degrees, becoming more and more transparent until finally it sees the Alinga Matra, what Patanjali is calling unmanifested nature. There's where all the seeds to everything are. So if you're following along with the 4,320,000,000 year evolutionary theory and you believe in that, or if you think God created everything in 7 days and you're taking that literally, then you should go back and look at the Indian seers and what they have been saying for thousands of years. And so that you can find yourself to a place where you too can see that everything came from seeds in your mind. In this case, it was the great mind, of which your mind is a part. At least right now it is. When you pass from this body and you merge in formlessness, you will be the great mind. There will be no barriers or borders, right? Didn't we just say that? No more space, no more limitation, and so forth. See how we're trying to take the thinking mind would go deeper and deeper by making these connections, so that it's just not, a lot of talk that's coming out of Babaji's mouth, but actually he knows maybe a little bit of what he's talking about. He's done some study and he's put these together, and he wants you to make these connections too and open up these channels inside towards self-realization, if you want to call it that. And so in this case, you can make a very strong point for the fact that all of this that you see, taste, touch, hear, and smell that's in a subtler state in your dream is really coming out of seeds in your formless nature. That is, unmanifested Prakriti is inside of you. And you see those seeds when you go into deep sleep, bare semblances of what's out here, you see. In fact, you can almost turn around and say, this is a bare semblance of what's in there, because there's where the real power is, in the seeds of consciousness. Now, do you understand why he's calling it Sampragyata and Asampragyata? Why he calls it Nirbija, seedless, when it gets here. The seeds are important, you see, to things. And so, Asampragyata means no seeds. Sampragyata means with seeds. So the seeds are in unmanifested consciousness. It's called Alinga. The first form that came out was God's mind. After that, all of these powers came out. They gave rise to the Tanmatras. They gave rise to the 24 cosmic principles. And there you have it, evolution and involution. None of us here in the West, very few of us are aware of involution. We just are aware of evolution, and that's what they're trying to teach us and convince us about. That's why my teacher said, they're trying to convince me that if I want to see my ancestors, I have to go to the zoo, you see. Visit the monkey house, the simian den. You see. So basically, that's not true. You have to go inside to the kingdoms of heaven and find formlessness. In that formlessness, you'll find the seeds to everything. All your doubts here, you see, where is it? Right here, the last one, Vichikisa. The last doubt will be destroyed when you find the seeds to everything in your own consciousness. And I'll end this half there. We'll take 15 minutes break and come back. Thank you for your kind attention. Yes, and welcome everyone here. Are we off? you have returned to the SRV Hawaii Ashram Spiritual Center here, where from our new shrine room and classroom we are broadcasting live the third class of a series of 3 in the 7th limb of yoga, meditation or tame yoga. And we have about an hour and 10 minutes or so to finish up this series. And remember I said that I was teaching the 7th limb as according to what preceded it, that is especially the 5th and 6th limbs of controlling the mind and in pratyahara and getting into real concentration. And then I was also going to try and present a little bit of what the 7th limb is supposed to lead to. That's called Samadhi. And in Patanjali's way of saying, as we ended the first half, it's a sampragyata, seedless Samadhi, that these great seers are getting into. It's the non-dual experience, or Advaita Vedanta, as we would say it in our tradition. And you'd probably say that Satori and maybe even beatific vision, if there was not a word in Christendom that could quite express it other than I and my Father are one, that you could say that any of these expressions are to be used to explain this absence of difference or distinction, the disappearance of all forms and names, and what that signifies, of course, indescribable, but nonetheless has been attempted to be described, because the Indian seers are not ones to fall back from any challenge, spiritually speaking, as we know. In them have been born so many systems like Vedanta and Yoga and Samkhya and Tantra and others, and they've also kept them, the embers and fires, flames of them burning through thousands of years, and therefore we can go to them for teachings and meditation where we don't find them in many other traditions. And also a little bit more on the finer points of Samadhi and how this is seen by seers in stages, as we just sang before we had our break. Enlightenment dawns on the mind by stages. Or if you wanted to sing it in Shankara's way of singing, he would say, Yata darpana bhava abhasa hano Mukam vijite kalpana binamekam Tata diviyoge nirbhasako kuyaha Sanitya palabdhi swarupahamatman Sanitya palabdhi swarupahamatman One of the verses of Hasta Amalaka Stotram, this one is number 5, he says about that absence of reflections and absence of appearances and the disappearance of all name and form, he says, if you remove the reflective surface, then the form disappears entirely. So, in other words, everything in name and form is a reflective surface for Brahman. The light of Brahman is shining in everything. Ramakrishna used a very beautiful analogy once. One of his students approached him early morning outside. Master was meditating. A sunny morning, and the morning dew was sparkling and everything. He says, how does Brahman exist in everything? I don't understand that. We were taught that Brahman really isn't in the physical world, that it can't be divided. So how does it appear in all these forms? So the question went like that, and Sri Ramakrishna pointed to all the dewdrops and said, just like the sun shines in all these dewdrops, in the same way Brahman is shining through all these beings. So if you remove the reflective surface, then nothing else exists. It would be this light of consciousness appearing to the seer in the 8th limb of yoga, the sampragyata or nirvikalpa, we call it in Vedanta. The vision would be not only uninterrupted but unimpeded by any form. so much so that you would feel like you're absorbing into the light, say in 4 stages, or in 6 different types of seated samadhi, and then all of a sudden you felt, I am the light, and you came to know yourself as that. So, indescribable, yes. Needs to be experienced, yes. Once you have, then you may be one of those beings that come out, like Lord Buddha and Patanjali have done, and proclaim that to beings. Maybe even come back more than once in some cases. These avatars that we've been talking about. So he says, if you remove that reflective surface of everything, then nothing but that light will be shining. And what remains is the formless essence, the objectless reality. So he's talking about the disappearance of objects. First in deep sleep, and then in lower samadhi, then with just the thought of objects, and then finally in the highest samadhi where nothing reflective is there to shine off of, for that light to shine off of. So that's why in Vedanta we often say the moon shines by borrowed light. So it gives us a sort of way of thinking that the ego and the intellect, kind of in cahoots, are borrowing their light of life from Brahman. They think they are the light, but they don't have their own light. When the ego gives up and the intellect finally loses its barriers and distinctions, and it will just absorb into that light like a hailstone into the ocean, Shankara said. And then it will be that one homogeneous mass of pure conscious awareness. So again, words used as best as we can use them to describe and inspire, so that at the very least we know that there have been souls that have breached that highest barrier and penetrated through and had that experience, come back to tell of it even. He goes on to say, that is, this is Hasta Amalaka, he's fruit in the palm of your hand is his name. He can see that light as easily as you could see the fruit in the palm of your hand. So he goes on to say, in this way, if you remove the reflective surface, the external mind gets completely stilled, quieted, and focused on reality. It always reminds me of experiments I did with a rooster I had when I was a young boy. I just put a dot on the cement of my patio, and then I took the rooster's head and I put its beak on that dot. And its eyes were kind of going around, distracted by things. All of a sudden they focused on that dot and stayed there. And I could take my hand away from the rooster and it was focused on that dot. We laughed at it and so forth, of course, as kids. And finally we bumped it and kind of got out of its hypnotism. But that always reminded me of that, is when the mind gets, as the Stotram says, gets focused on reality and the mind is completely stilled, it just becomes that dot. And of course, symbolically, we're calling this the bijam, the third eye, or the white dove ascending. It's been called different things, the Jnana Chakshu by Sri Krishna. So that center is definitely open for any of this to be able to happen to the soul. And then he ends it by saying, what is left when this reflective surface is removed is the eternal abode, my true existence. And that's what he means when he says, Sanicha Palabdis Swarupahamatma. So he's the Swarupa, or the essence of things. And that's, of course, a very well-known word in Sanskrit. So this describes a little bit and helps us approach with our minds, at least in class, in a higher intellectual way, to understand this alinga, which is a very famous word in yoga that Patanjali has borrowed. Linga just means form, and alinga means, oops, no more form anymore. They've taken it all away. Reflective surface is gone. The light doesn't have any barriers anymore. Just like lowering all the walls and all sort of. In that same stotram, actually, there's a Hastamlaka stotram. There's a last verse describes the horizon of the sky and how it seems to make the sky have a shape. See, the mountains give the sky a shape which really doesn't belong to the sky. So if you took the mountains away, all of a sudden it would just be this limitless horizon of infinite space. And so that's another analogy they use. The things appear to have properties that really don't belong to them. People are assigning Brahman properties and attributes to Brahman when it really doesn't have any. Sometimes this is done so that they can understand the formless. Other times it's done because they're not aware that they're actually doing a disservice by calling Brahman into form. And it's really not possible to do that. That's why, like John said, Christ told him, "No man hath seen God with these eyes." So you can't really see Brahman with things that are finite, like the eyes, the prana, the mind, the intellect, even all the way up to the mahat. You can't really see God there. It's always formless. So when you make this transition from mahat from linga to alinga, it's a very rare and special state of consciousness, and it's what is seen there is, again, property of this jnana chakshu. It's a specific property of the third eye, and you're entering into Mahashakti's region, and regions like Paramashiva and Mahavishnu and so forth. The greatest essence of these forms that you once saw as deities now has returned to its formless essence. It's a very beautiful and ecstatic experience. Now, that only leaves a sampragata samadhi to flesh out here in this chart. So notice how there's so much to say about this. You get down to this last little tenth of an area here at the chart, there's so little to say about a sampragata. It's seedless. So what can you say about it? Well, you can say the soul meditates on the awareness of cessation. You have to put together some very interesting and almost contradictory phrases in English. The awareness of cessation. When you think awareness, you think presence, but you never think of the cessation of everything but the presence. So again, you're getting into an area of consciousness that remains aware when objects go away. Now that's not the case when you go into dream and deep sleep. You don't usually remain aware when you dream. That is, your awareness is off and on again, isn't it? And when you go into deep sleep, awareness is usually not there in ordinary souls. They are actually seeing the seeds of all that exists, but they don't remember it and come back with that knowledge. Whereas this special seer who has opened up these channels to inner consciousness that we describe as yoga or nirvikalpa or sampragata, nirvana and so forth, will see those seeds and will make a decision of whether to water them or not. In other words, they can pass beyond seeds. Now, Sri Ramakrishna mentioned that about the 7 chakras. He said, when I reached these upper chakras, there were deities there that wanted me to come and stay at these levels of consciousness. We're to think that there are just like thousands of worlds here, out in space. Inside, there are also thousands of worlds that one can move around. Of course, the limitations of light years and all that are not there. The mind moves so fast that it's much swifter than light and sound. So it would be moving inwardly at an extremely immediate. And so Sri Ramakrishna could see these worlds, and he could also hear the sound Om and see that word, he said, when he was at that level. So I bring that up because then he said, it's like saying he would be seeing the seeds for all of the manifestation of the worlds that fall out in spectrums from subtler to grosser to denser. And then he could also see that beyond there was the light of Brahman, and beyond all forms, and that's the 7th chakra, and he could immerse himself in that. So his way of saying it in a very friendly and easy to understand way, not quite so intellectual as the Buddhists and not quite so philosophical like the yogis, he would say it in a very simple way, that he would enter into that highest state of formlessness, and so that would be beyond seeds, the seeds of watering consciousness so that the worlds would appear to consciousness again as it dipped down or came out from inner planes to this outer plane. He himself used to come out from those planes to the inner planes to the outer planes and couldn't recognize you. Even if you were his chief disciple or his very wife, he couldn't recognize you for a while because the ego had disappeared for him. And he had to take it back by degrees when he got back into the body. So you can, these descriptions of him, unique in all the spiritual history of the world, is one of the great benefits of having a great soul like him come. And so we haven't seen one like him really for on that level of samadhi since Lord Buddha, really. So to have him come in this day and age and see him go through this in the front of the public eye, that is the devotees that were around him, and then to have it described by M in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, and to have Sri Ramakrishna talk about different samadhis that he had, some of them which weren't even listed in the scriptures of India, which were thousands of years old. That's a very amazing thing, and a very rare benefit for all of us who want to court samadhi and realize our true nature in this very lifetime. So actually I find I have a lot to say about this, even though Asampragyata doesn't have a lot to say about it itself on the chart. But when I hear the word awareness of cessation, it inspires. You see, just like the states of absorption inspire you at some point. You want to see it, you want to even tell others about it. It's almost an irrepressible force in you that wants to do that. Well, they call that state Mahanidra. And Mahanidra, you know, Nidra means deep sleep, and Maha means great. So it's the great deep sleep. This is you might say you're falling asleep to everything that's limited. And consciousness is now free and open in this deep, peaceful rest, which you get in deep sleep, but which you forget when you come out of. But in this case, consciousness is fully aware of the cessation of all things. And it actually dotes on the cessation of things because, let's face it, when you come out of deep sleep into waking state and there's chaos everywhere around you, the kids are yelling and screaming or rockets are falling on your country or whatever, you come out of deep sleep, it's no fun. You might as well say, why did you even wake me up? I was better off in the state of formlessness I was in. So in that way you can say Mahanidra is near bija, free from the seeds of creation. Now, Patanjali even says this himself in his own sutras. Free from the seeds of creation. So near bija, asampragyata, no seeds. Those seeds, remember, were seen in deep sleep, which is a linga. I mean, if you talk about tanmatras being missing from our cosmology of connection to dream, to heaven, and so forth, this is missing. Understanding a manifested prakriti is a thing that is missing on the level of our deepest practice of meditation. We need to fill that in, at least hear about it, and then entertain it, as I've been saying lately, and then you can grow into it by stages like that. Just like the ocean takes over land by stages when the tide comes in. Consciousness can begin to infill everything. It's also nirlambana. Nirlambana means, remember, alambanas were things that, of the 24 cosmic principles that Patanjali wanted you to meditate on, right? Well, let's just take this morning meditation, earth or water or fire. He wanted you to actually meditate on them for an hour or a half hour until you made a connection with them. Well, here now he's calling it niralambana. When you hear that Sanskrit word nir, like nirvana or nirvikalpa or nirbija, it means extinct. It means blown out. It means non-existence. It doesn't have a station, and he says here, it needs no supports. So Shankara sings about that here when he says, Aham nirvikalpo nirakara rupo vibhutva cha sarvatra sarvendriyanam nacha sangatam naiva muktirname Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham Shivoham Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham Shivoham. Beautiful stotram called the Nirvana Shatkam. Shatkam is 6, and he sang 6 verses on Nirvana when he had the experience. Just like Patanjali had the experience of Samprakata Samadhi, Lord Buddha had the experience of Nirvana, Shankara had the experience of Nirvikalpa. See? And so these are pretty much the same experience, because where's the difference in them when there's no form, no space, and when everything has ceased to be, that you're familiar with as having form and so forth, and there's just the wide open space of pure conscious awareness. Where's the difference? You might give it a little different name, but the one syllable that's constant throughout all those names is nir, isn't it? It's been blown out, it's been made extinct. That is, name, form, time, space, causation, all gone. And those are the things people usually take for life and experience in form, with name, in time, in space, and having karmic repercussions come as a result. When all of that gets wiped away, then you have your description for the highest non-dual experience. So, if Hasta Amalaka sings it, or his teacher sings it, doesn't matter. They're aware of this profound state. And so it's niralambana. Alambana means taking something as an object for meditation. So best English word is probably support. You need a support for meditation. I think I'll use my Guru's picture. See? So, all right, so there it is outside. It's my outer thought. Now I've got to shut my eyes to that and picture him or her inside. There's the picture again, you see. So you're having a support for meditation. It's called an image of your Guru, or Shiva beyond form, you see. So you're really having experiences or adventures in consciousness with your own consciousness, moving in and out of these states, and the more you do it, the better for you. Because then pretty soon you'll do away with inner and outer, and this will be the result. Because inner and outer is another duality that poses a problem, you see, after a while. You'll have doubt around it still. What's real, the inner or the outer? Or where do I want to be, inner or outer? People are going through that quite often. Say, well, let's see, if I go formless, then I won't be able to taste food, I won't be able to see nature, I won't be able to see the Buddha if he comes again, or Jesus when he comes. See, do I really want to do that? Shouldn't I just stay here? So maybe the way to put that all to rest is just to have the non-dual experience and then be free, see. Because if you only have experience with form, no matter how high it might get, right on up to the Mahat, then are you still in charge, you see, of your future lives? See, how much will you see in your future lives with only that much knowledge? But if you go the distance and have the non-dual experience, you have freedom in all the worlds, and beyond the worlds too. So you have that special ability, and this probably could be said to those beings who have a certain penchant for form only. One of the ways in which it could be very convincing to, no matter what they in the end decide to do, come back to form, come back to see Krishna and Shiva or whatever, but come back and tell them, I've had the non-dual experience like you. I understand what you're saying. I and my father are one. I and my mother are one, in Sri Ramakrishna's case. So that's two very powerful points here about, in these 3 bullet points about the Sampragata. The last one, remember, they are the great sleep, the disappearance of any support for your meditation. There's no more forms. You're it. It's the greatest game of formless tag you ever played. You're it. And then finally this third one where he says, abhava, unconditioned existence. Abhava yoga is said to be one of the two greatest yogas possible. The other one is called Mahayoga. Mahayoga is absolute fullness of everything. Abhava yoga is the absolute emptiness of everything. And there are souls who lean one way or the other. I say some souls may be very unique ones, like Sri Ramakrishna had both. So he could avail himself of both conditions. But this is, of course, probably the subtlest of all dualities possible, Mahayoga and Abhava. Probably you wouldn't want to assign it to the word duality because everything dual has been removed of it in order to have it. So it's a state of consciousness all its own, but there it is in the teachings. Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't, as they say in the commercial. So sometimes you feel like seeing God with form, sometimes you feel like going formless. And this should be natural to the soul whose very nature is beyond name and form. Now, the only points to say about this, and then we can say that we have done our best in 3 hours, or in the 9 hours we've been talking about it, to pose the seventh limb of yoga as what precedes it, and also what comes after it. This is called Samadhi, the eighth limb. So in order to get to the eighth limb and stay there and maintain it and experience it, meditation is going to have to be availed of all of this. And in order for meditation to be availed of all of this we've been talking about, concentration has to be unbroken. And in order for concentration to be unbroken, pratyahara, your ability to withdraw from names and forms, has to be flawless, or it will get interrupted. And interruptions will cause these problems, which really have no place on this chart. When you talk about these 4 states of formlessness and these 4 states of arupa samadhi, these should not be there. See, what's the word in English we use for Patanjali's way of explaining that? He called them vikshepas or antarayas. Best word we've found in English for these culprits is despoiler. They're despoilers. They will come in and wreak havoc on your pure conscious aware state. And you know, when you say wreak havoc on that state of pure conscious awareness, you're not talking about wars and things that are obviously horrible. You're talking about a grain of sand in your bed. When you reach that high state of consciousness, the slightest little thing that pulls you out of it is an irritation. And this is where they came up with the word Ananda. See, where so many beings have the last name Ananda, right? You wouldn't want to deliver a telegraph to a person with the name Ananda on it because you wouldn't be able to find the person. So this whole state of consciousness called Ananda is without irritation. It's without any interruption. It's without any breaks. It's unflawed. It's constant, continuous. Like the flow of oil from one beaker to another. Taila Dara meditation is called. So that's what they get into, and then they don't want to. In fact, reminds me of one sloka in the Ashtavakra Samhita. The seer in non-dual samadhi is so focused and so much in bliss that he doesn't want to even raise and lower his eyebrows anymore. See? I mean, well, his eyelashes probably would be better. See? So he just doesn't want to open and shut the eyes anymore. That's too much trouble, the sloka says. See? So sometimes maybe they'll just have them half open. Ah, that's better. Mm-hmm. I've gotten rid of the duality of opening and closing the eyes. So that kind of bliss is just overcome that soul. An elephant can enter into a lake, into a pool, and cause a bunch of waves. But when it gets into the ocean, nothing happens. So these souls are like great oceans of consciousness, which nothing can bother. And they want to keep it that way. So in that way, you would say, this unconditioned existence has to be kept sacrosanct, maintained as pure and perfect at all times. Bare descriptions here, paravairagya has dawned. there are 12 steps of detachment. Parvaryaga is the 12th. So supreme or absolute or ultimate detachment from all things has been attained. And in control or void of all vrittis. So if the mind does come back and think, in order to help people, say, have compassion, it'll take on vrittis, but it will not be affected by them. It can start thinking, but cannot identify with the mind. And it can compose 8-limb systems without getting limited by them, that kind of thing. Or it can remain void of all vibrations and just stay in its own pure state. Last two, penultimate says here, contains only samskaras of samadhi. Samskaras are impressions in your mind. See, if you're a doctor, you might be born as a doctor the next lifetime, a doctor in the next lifetime, and so forth. And that's a samskara in your mind. And so people are called back to life by these samskaras and the karmas that form them. Samskara and karma should be taught together. Usually you hear about karma and you learn a little about that, but you don't know. You say, oh, I have to suffer that karma. But the suffering of that karma causes another karma of suffering that becomes a samskara. And so you get into a habit of suffering. Look around. Or you get into a habit of pleasure. Look around. See? So the mind has to be free of vrittis, right? That's what it said, free of vrittis over here. See? So in this way they're saying it contains, that mind that has gotten into Siddha Samadhi contains only samskaras of samadhi. That is, if it has anything inside of it at all, it's just samadhi, 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 samadhi. I'm singing a line out of a stotram to Divine Mother that has the word samadhi about 10 times in a row. It's the Mahishasura Sri Durga stotram. See? Samana samadhi, samana samadhi, on and on about samadhi. So that's what they, all that they have in their mind as far as a seed goes. So there's no other place to go to in their mind except samadhi. It's hard to describe, but you're getting the gist, I think. You can tell by the smiles on your faces. Finally, what to say? Finally, he says, is the self dwelling in the self? Oh, and both of those selves are capitalized. So, of course, we know the ahamkara self, small s, lowercase self, has disappeared and is having a hard time even coming back. It's like drowning in the oceans of consciousness. Hey, don't forget about me. Bring me back once in a while. So if you come out of higher samadhi, you'll bring back your ego a little bit, and they do that. You want to come back for chocolate ice cream? Come back. You see, keep a little desire for chocolate ice cream, that'll bring you back into the body. But the minute you start to taste chocolate ice cream, you're going to say, the samadhi of chocolate ice cream isn't quite as good as the samadhi of samadhi, 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 and then you're back into samadhi again, and all forms disappear. Well, the only thing in our remaining time, because I've reached what I wanted to accomplish in these 3 classes, is to dip a little bit more into yoga. And I brought this chart of the universal ocean of awareness that it would be good to look at. I also brought a couple other charts that we could look at, but not necessarily could take up a lot more time than we have here available to us. Here on my list is oh yes, I have this under the yoga heading, and there it is. You can see here that Divine Mother, Holy Mother Shisharda, is superimposed again, back behind, in the sky of awareness, behind this ocean, which is full of waves that are named after yogas. Now, she says, the truth is this: that one who is really anxious to cross the ocean of this world will somehow break his bonds. No one can entangle him. So she was very adamant about the fact that if you had the sincere desire to be free, which is called mumukshutvam, that you would find a way. And of course, the philosophy is there to supply you with as many different paths as you want to take. Taking one is best at first. Digging one deep well would be good, but there doesn't mean that all these paths don't converge at some point. Also, that they can't be used in conjunction with one another, which is sometimes a doubt in people's minds. So down here is said, according to Patanjali, there are erratic thought forms called vrittis in the human mind, which must be pacified. Further, there are mighty waves of yoga in the ocean of pure conscious awareness, and they must be utilized for this task. So if you have vrittis of the mind that are problematic, attachments to certain things and barriers that you can't get through that keep you out of this seventh limb of meditation per se, then the path of yoga is for you. You're going to want to do a practice. There's no path more famous in the world of religion and philosophy than yoga. Probably because many paths are not advising spiritual practice. That's a painful fact. Many of the religions just are based in faith. And where's the spiritual practice with which to perfect you? You're cut in God. You have to cut yourself in God's image, Jesus said. And prayer alone is not going to do that. If God is pure and perfect, and Jesus was too, then that be thee perfect as the Lord in heaven is also perfect, was what was said by Jesus. So that's going to take some practice. Nobody can just slip into Samadhi accidentally. It's not even easy to get into heaven without some kind of practice. And heaven is far below Samadhi, we have to say. Formless Samadhi. So using then these paths of yoga are open to everyone. And the word yoga is really used in a more universal sense like that. It's not just specifically Hindu, for instance. Other religions have proposed, and there have been beings who have gone into deep states, and therefore must be examined. You might start off with just the yogas of the Bhagavad Gita, 18 of them. I mean, there's more in the Bhagavad Gita. He mentions the four yogas, four classic yogas, which are listed here, but these are all yogas that the chapters are named after. So he was teaching Ananya Yoga, Abhyasa Yoga, the yoga of constant practice, Samkhya Yoga, which we just looked at here in these 24 cosmic principles, right? That was basically Samkhya Yoga, what Patanjali was proposing to meditate on. About right there was Samkhya Yoga's list. Also, Samkhya just means varieties too. So you're meditating on all the things. Sannyas Yoga, how to give up works and get knowledge, and how to give up then both works and knowledge and get freedom. Vibhuti Yoga, the yoga of divine incarnations. If you look into the avatars and take them as your ideals, they will help you. You need place. The Lord has many powers. Vibhuti is powers. So those are divine powers, not occult powers necessarily, but divine powers that you're beginning to see in these great souls. Jnana Vijnana Yoga, how to get from the yoga of discrimination to the yoga of direct spiritual experience. These are all being told to Arjuna on the battlefield. The beautiful nature of the Gita. Purushottama Yoga, that is, Purushottama means the supreme person. In fact, our founder, Lex Hixon, was given that name, Purushottama, by one person, one teacher. So Purushottama means this supremely divine soul, Purusha. Akshara Brahma Yoga, there you get the Gita's take on the Nando Brahman, Akshara, beyond. indivisible and impermeable and so forth. So there's a teaching on that. Raja Vidya Raja Guhya Yoga is the supreme science and the supreme secret. And Guhya means secret. So the supreme knowledge and the supreme secret of yoga. Jnana Karma Sannyasa, that is of course how to get beyond actions and knowledge and get into sannyas, the final stage of life. Shraddhatraya Vibhaga Yoga, that's how these triputis, the three kinds of faith are exercised by beings. Lower, middling, and higher faith, you might say. Vishvarupa Darshana Yoga, that's having a vision of God with form. When Krishna touched Arjuna on the battlefield, and all of a sudden Arjuna had Vishvarupa Darshana. Darshana means actual communion with the form of God inside of you. A very powerful vision. Too powerful for Arjuna, in fact. He wanted it to go away not long after he saw it. Please return to your two-armed form, Krishna, he said, because he saw this million-armed form and million mouths and million legs, and all, taking the battlefield of Kurukshetra and swallowing it whole. Basically, everyone dying into this great soul. So it's a very powerful vision. Vishvarupa, you're having a rupa, Vishva Rupa, the form of Vishva, that is God in his cosmic form. You're having a vision of that. Usually not seen by most people. And Sri Ramakrishna said, to get that you have to have love eyes and love ears. You see, you have to be given special senses to have that. I just quoted John by saying, no man has seen God with these eyes. So you're not going to see Vishvarupa Darshanam here. You're going to see it coming out of some other dimension. But don't make the mistake that dimension is up in the sky. That dimension is in you. And like if you're Paul and you're on the road to Damascus and Jesus comes up to you, and he's been dead for centuries, so-called, then you're having a vision of him. Seems like he's on planet Earth, but nobody else in the whole train of pilgrims saw him except Paul, you see. So it was a vision specifically for Paul coming out of his own consciousness, projected by Jesus, so that he could get a message. It's kind of a form of Vishvarupa Darshanam. Only, of course, it was milder than the one that Arjuna got visited with. You have to read that in the Bhagavad Gita, that chapter. Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga means the yoga of the three gunas. Another thing very rare and unknown to most people, and not mentioned in any other religion or philosophy of the world in all its history except in India. They've got it down to there's these three modes of nature that you're under the press of. One's called inertia, one's called activity, and one's called balance. These three gunas are responsible for most everything that you enjoy and suffer. These three gunas are responsible for cycles of time. And they're not, unfortunately, brought into yoga, Patanjali's version, but they would fall right here in the linga-alinga area, is that the gunas would have to be mentioned as coming in and out of effect. Sometimes they're in potential, sometimes they're manifest, just like nature. So the gunas would be accompanying the appearance of the worlds and then also disappearing when the worlds disappear. In other words, they're going to come in through activity, through restlessness, and then they're going to suffer either inertia, slothfulness, heaviness, doubts and things in the mind, or they're going to have pleasure and bliss and contentment and happiness and balance, you see. But the problem with them is they're always shifting. They're trading places all the time. So you're supposed to get trigunatita, get beyond the three gunas in your meditation. So that whole chapter you can look at. Kshetra, Kshetragya Yoga, the yoga of the field and its knower. You might as well say, I keep flipping this back and forth, but just for reference for us, that this is the field and its knower right there, pretty much. Those 24 cosmic principles of Kapila in Krishna's time were called the eightfold body. And so he was describing it as the five elements and the threefold mind, basically. And that's how Sri Krishna described the field, kshetra, in that time. And kshetragra was himself, the knower of the field. So you have to become the knower of your field. See, that is earth, air, fire, water, ether, tasting, touching, hearing, smelling, seeing, so forth. This is your field. Jesus even said that, sporting in the field, right? The Lord sports in this field of activity, so you have to become the knower of your field. And that chapter is about that. Daivasura Sampat Yoga. That is, Daiva and Asura. Here's the problem, good and bad. Not only in experiences you have, but in people you meet. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. Same with the gods and other divine beings. Some of them are good, some of them aren't so good. Some of them are benign, some of them are wrathful, if you want to put it in more contemporary. So this needs to be figured out by you, the nature of a thing. And then when you figure out the nature of a thing, you can benefit by one and avoid the other. It's a type of discrimination in the Gita that's specific to Sri Krishna's teachings. He's not putting kids' gloves on and saying the Atman's in everyone and in everything. No, the Atman is not in hardly anything we see here. It's buried under mounds and mounds of earth, as Sri Ramakrishna said, and you're going to have to do a lot of digging to find it. You won't have to dig so far to find it in your guru, and you won't have to dig so far to find it in Jesus and Buddha and Patanjali, but nevertheless, coverings are everywhere. I started off the class talking about them. So the asuras, or the negative beings, are also at play here in this field. So both of those yogas, the three gunas and the kshetragya and the Daiva Sura Sampat Yoga come right together in the Gita to teach you a lesson, almost as their own Triputi, I've always thought. So very good to look into that. Finally, moksha sannyasa yoga. When you get to that final stage of sannyasa where you've become perfected, you can get moksha, or mukti sometimes they call it. So a good reading of yoga right there, just in the Bhagavad Gita's 18 chapters, which is why the scripture is so brilliant. Now, some traditional yogas I put down here at the bottom as part of these waves. That is, there's Advaita yoga, that's the yoga of non-duality. There's, of course, karma yoga, be good to practice that. The yoga of selfless actions for the good of others, without desiring the fruits for yourself. Would be a nice long sentence for that, to name that. Antar yoga is any yoga you practice that's inward, and they have some specific practices for that. Jnana yoga is the yoga of discriminating wisdom, a lot of which you're getting here when I speak the Dharma. And then Charya yoga, it's like ritualism. People, lots of them, not everyone needs it, but a lot of people have to come to some sort of ritualism in order to clear the atmosphere. You see, they want to try and make this area divine, which is why we set up a classroom and a shrine room. Why you do that at home too is so you have a divine atmosphere to go to that the world will not encroach on. So you want to keep that all pure and sacrosanct. Only do things Samadhi. Only do things that have divine implications there. Don't eat in there, or probably not even study scriptures in your meditation room. Do that in a library. But basically just keep it sacrosanct for that one purpose of uncovering your own consciousness, which is sacred. Laya yoga is the yoga of dissolution. There are several forms of that. See, we looked at that on that chart with Swami Vivekananda on it. Laya Chintaya yoga, remember, the dissolution of everything. The dissolution of objects, then the dissolution of thoughts, and dissolution of your ego, all back into the formless Brahman. It's sometimes, again, a three-stage process. Mantra yoga probably needs no description. It's almost a yoga of its own. could even be put up here and call these the 5 yogas, I've often thought, because it's so connected to Vedanta and Tantra and Yoga and all the darshanas. Everyone uses mantra. Other religions use it too. Catholicism and Sufism, and so everyone's saying the Lord's name in some way, shape, or form, and benefiting by it. Prema Bhakti Yoga is, of course, the yoga of extreme devotion to God. If you can practice it unerringly and you're qualified for it, all your problems will go away, and you'll be in love with the self. The self is all there is, and none else exists, as Vivekananda said, and thou art that. Kriya Yoga, it's got reputations both famous and infamous, but I'd say probably, you could be tempted to call it, if you look at Patanjali's way of using it, it's taking tapas, swadhyaya, and austerity, study of scriptures, and Ishvara. Where's Ishvara Pranidhana? Oh yeah, it's there. Well, I was just looking for the Sanskrit. So it's taking these 3 niyamas and putting them into one practice. That's called Kriya Yoga. So you might think he already thinks you're nonviolent and truthful and all that. You don't really need to practice that. But if you really want to practice yoga, and especially if it's Kriya Yoga, you put yourself into austerity, you study the scriptures, and you increase your devotion to God. He said that'll do it. That's the original Kriya Yoga, as far as I'm concerned. Other forms of Kriya Yoga have come along since then. A lot of them have to do with breathing, nervous system, and so forth. But I'd say if you want to give an overall cover term to Kriya Yoga, it's austerities. You do certain austerities that cut you in the form of God, that widen you. So you could really take any one of these and broaden them, and that would be Kriya Yoga, the practice of austerities. So you wouldn't just want to breathe and call that Kriya, or something, but you'd want to expand all of that. Vasana Yoga, how to awaken powers in you, I'd say. Vasanas are usually called desires, but when you put it next to the word yoga, it means that these desires are very powerful in you, and you can turn them to a positive end. Like somebody asked Ramakrishna once, who was a monk, young monk, said, how do I get rid of lust? And Ramakrishna said, don't get rid of it, increase it. The monk was stymied for a second, and Ramakrishna said, increase it means turn it towards God and increase it. Any power in you, any passion in you has a great power, like a snake. If you just take the poison and the fangs out of the snake, you can impress your friends. I own a snake, wrap it around their bodies. But with the poison and the fangs in there, it's a danger, you see. So passions are like that. They have a great power in them. You just have to make sure you neutralize the poison in it and then use the power. So it's kind of the idea here around Vasana Yoga. So I wouldn't say it's just about getting rid of desires, because how can you do that? As long as you have a mind-body mechanism, you're going to have desires. Sri Ramakrishna said they'll never go away, just keep them at a minimum. So that's the art, how to minimize impediments in you. Because as long as you have a mind-ego complex, until you get into a state of samadhi that destroys them, which is called seedless, there are going to be seeds of desire in your mind, even to a very high state. The gods have desires, right? Otherwise they wouldn't be lording over the inner worlds. They have a desire for lordship. That's a desire. So you can see my point then. Bhakti Yoga, practice of devotion. If a man comes and puts oil into the machine every day, it runs without a problem. That oil is devotion. If he doesn't come, it seizes up and the whole machine falls apart. Then there's Dhyan Yoga. Well, after listening to me talk for 9 hours on the 7th limb of yoga, if you don't know what that is, then I give up. The yoga of meditation. Shiva yoga is there. Of course, that has specifically to do with Lord Shiva. Laksha yoga is there, and you're going to want to practice that in the sense that Laksha, Lakshmi, there are other definitions for that word, which means concentration. So you're practicing the yoga of concentration on things, Laksha yoga. Siddha yoga is there. Siddha yoga, that's the yoga of increasing these powers in you. I would say not the occult ones, but the godlike powers. There's a list of 8 occult powers, but there's also the 6 powers of the Lord. Those are benign powers and very helpful. The others could lead you to trouble. There's Brahma yoga, of course, that's the yoga of inception, the yoga of knowing where everything came from. And Ashtanga yoga, what's that? 8 limb, there it is, Ashtanga yoga. This chart version of mine here doesn't have it, but this is the newer version of it. I put the 4 main yogas there. He says, this is the new religion of this age, the synthesis of yoga, knowledge, devotion, and work, the propagation of knowledge and devotion down to the very lowest without distinction of age or sex. Swami Vivekananda says. I think the most powerful part of that statement is that this is the religion of the new age. If we can look at this age and practice the 4 yogas, each of us, he calls this yoga, that's this, that's Raja, and then knowledge, that's Jnana, Dharma, and then devotion, that's Bhakti, which you see down here, and then karma, too. You see, karma yoga is the yoga of selfless action, serving God and other beings. Don't serve other beings. Serve God and other beings. Vivekananda would say it's the good distinction. You don't want to serve the ego because that'll flatter it, expand it. So, yoga as proposed in these various ways is how we shall end our class. He says up here at the top a very beautiful quote. This was toward the end of his life when he knew he was going to leave the body. He said, sitting up on the snow peaks of the Himalayas, I repeat from the Upanishads, quote, he has neither disease nor decay nor death, for verily he has obtained a body full of the fire of yoga. Unquote. So Vivekananda had this fire of yoga in him, and with that he did everything. He entered the body and left the body with the fire of yoga. And he dealt with all sorts of things like diabetes when it had no cure. He dealt with that with the fire of yoga. And with the schooling of people as varied as Hindus all the way to Americans and English that were invading his country, he dealt with all of that with the fire of yoga. So that was, you might say, his Rajaguhya, his great secret, see, his cosmic secret. So fire of yoga can be looked at. We have her in female form all around us in this room. There's 3 beautiful pictures of Mother Pele, the Hawaiian goddess of lava and fire, and how she purifies everything, how she gives us support for food and for life on an island otherwise surrounded on all sides by 2,600 miles of ocean. Ganga Pacifica, we call her, all around us. So here we have a very wonderful opportunity and ability, hopefully, with these teachings to practice and realize the end and aim of yoga. And if you want to know more about it, you may look back on these 3 classes that we're concluding this minute and review it and pick and choose what's going to work for you best in order to reach this highest limb. At least reach the penultimate limb, the 7th limb called Dhyan Yoga, in such a state that you'll never fall out of it again. You won't have to backtrack. And you can get into the 8th limb Samadhi with the least amount of effort and trouble. So here, let's end with a chant. Om Tat Snayo, Om tachnaya ravrinnimahe gatung yagyaya gatung ye nupataye daivi svastrastu naha svastir manusebhyaha urdhvam jagatu bhesajam samno astu dvipade sanchatushpate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we make a selfless offering into the great self, dissolving the little self into the great self. May we always revere the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices. May we always delight in this offering. May peace be unto the entire human race. May healing and well-being always abide among us. May well-being and prosperity also come unto us. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.